order. And so here we are. So one of the, so somebody's ringing.
Sorry.
Yeah. So one of the things about the parsha we start is that we start talking about Avram Avinu. And Avram Avinu actually is a persona who stood against the common narrative in his time. Common narrative in his time was worshiping idols. Common narrative in his time was, his own father manufactured and produced idols. Common narrative in his time, I think the king of the time was power hungry. Wasn't Nebuchadnezzar? Who was it? The king?
Was it Nimrod?
Nimrod, right. Nimrod was total egomaniac. He's God. Another persona like Pharaoh, I'm God. We've had a lot of these in history. And then this person, Abraham, who's an individual who starts articulating a different narrative. And the narrative is completely different to the mainstream. And he's called Avraham HaIvri because he was on the other side of the river, but the other side of the mainstream narrative. And he's a good role model, really, for a Jewish position, and not just a Jewish position and the position of when all around you are saying X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean you have to say X, Y, and Z. You got to try and find the truth. And we know from the Midrashim of Abraham, from a small child looking what is the unifying, underlining truth of the world? First of all, there's an incredible world. Is there a creator? Is there a source to this wonderment of the world? And is what is the power? How does this creator manifest its power? Who is it? Is it the sun? It seems like, all of reality comes from the sun, but the sun sets. The cute childish midrash of, could it be the sun that's the god of the world? But it's not, because the sun sets. Is it the moon? Well, it's not the moon either. What is it? And this looking for this underlying principle of something that is worthy of worshiping, not Nimrod, not the big egotistical powers of the moment. And we know that Avram was actually even thrown into a furnace for his standing alone against the mainstream narrative, and God protected him. And then others who were not so authentic thought, well, Avram, managed to do that and copied him, but they weren't authentically trusting in God. And so they didn't withstand the test of the furnace. But anyway, so talking about Avraham, so there's two things. There's two things of ways of coming into the identity of Abraham, the values of Abraham, the lessons we learn from Abraham. So we can really look at Hayom Yom as two kind of ways to start fleshing out this reality of Abraham, and everything that Abraham accomplishes becomes a structure, spiritual DNA, upon which our spiritual inheritance is based on the accomplishments that Avram Avinu is able to make in his spiritual journey. It's almost like, if you think of it in financial terms, you have someone, and I don't know, I'm going to throw out a name. The name might be triggering for some people, but I'll throw it out anyway. You have someone like Elon Musk, let's say. He has a lot of money. And he's got a lot of money. I don't know if he has children or he has family or he doesn't, but he has all this money. He does? Good. Okay.
He has 9 children with 3 women he's not married to.
Oh, okay. So he has all this money, and then he wants to bestow this money. He might want to onto his children or they may be thinking he's going to bestow. He has very unusual ideas. Maybe he won't give them to his children. But Avraham has spiritual wealth, spiritual fortune through the largeness of his soul, the largeness of what he was able to comprehend, and the frontiers he was able to cross, so to speak. And those things become part of a Yerusha, an inheritance that he bestows to us as his followers, offspring, descendants. And so we have something called a spiritual inheritance, which is part of our spiritual DNA. So it's sensitivities and capabilities that we inherit from Avraham and then from Yitzchak and from Yaakov. That's why they're called our fathers, because they feed into the structure of who we are. So looking at the Hayom Yom, today was the 8th day of Cheshvan, and the teaching is all about what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is connected to the word savta, and savta means joining or attachment. And it's
grandma.
Say again?
Oh, grandma?
Grandma?
Doesn't
Savta.
grandma?
Oh, savta. Yes, savta. Savta is actually grandma as well. I'm not sure if it's the same spelling exactly, but maybe there's an aspect of connection there. Savta and Saba. Savta. So the actual word is joining or attachment. So whoever does a mitzvah, the root is this aspect of savta. We connect to the one giving us that commandment. So when we do a mitzvah, we get connected to Hashem, and the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself, because we get connected to the one who commanded us. And then the Hayom Yom gives us this beautiful analogy that if there was a simple person in a village and there was a big king, the king has no connection to the simple person. The simple person is living in a completely different reality to the king. The king has his fancy friends. He goes to his fancy clubs. I don't know if they kings to clubs, but let's say in modern terms, he has his fancy crowd. He goes to his fancy places. He has no relationship to a sanitation worker or someone on a way different economic, social status than he does. But if for some reason that simple person, the tea assistant, somehow comes and starts bringing him tea, or starts, becomes the person that this big king or CEO or whatever starts sending this particular guy to the mail room, to the coffee shop, and he starts giving him particular instructions and particular errands to do for him. So those things create the connection between this big important CEO. It's actually easier for us to relate to an idea of a king. It's not so much our reality kings and queens, but CEOs and stuff like that we have. So when he's giving that person an errand, go here, go there, get me coffee from Starbucks that has 3 sugars and whatever, he's talking to a real person, and the real person says, yes, sir, I'm going to do it. So that forms the connection. So that's the idea of what a mitzvah is. It's a connection formed between the one giving the instruction and the one doing the instruction. So that's the Hayom Yom from yesterday. And then the Hayom Yom from today is very cute. Today being tonight and tomorrow, because, as Torah Jews, the day begins with the night and the morning following on. So when my father was 4 or 5 years old, he went to his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, on Shabbos of this Pasha, and he began to cry. And he said, why did Hashem show himself to our father Avraham, but he doesn't show himself to us? And the Tzemach Tzedek answered him, oh, sorry, it's not this week's Pasha, it's next week's Pasha. This week's Pasha, we don't have Hashem appearing in the same way. But the Tzemach Tzedek answered him, when a tzaddik decides at the age of 99 years old that he should be circumcised, he deserves that Hashem appear to him. So that's the Hayom Yom. And the whole story of the circumcision with Avraham is Avram carrying out a mitzvah, a commandment from this entity that he started, searching for and wanting to create a relationship with. And this relationship that Avraham has with Hashem, and then he starts doing things which were also very against the culture of the time. So even doing a bris milah was against the culture of the time. And we know from Midrashim and everything that when Avram was commanded to do the bris, he wasn't sure if he should do it or not. And he had to speak to some of his friends, should he do it or not? Because if you imagine the leftist, the secular mentality of today that is trying to ban brisim in our day and age, because it's barbarian and it's abuse, and it's all these kind of things, and how in different courts of law right now in 2022, Jews are fighting in certain countries for the right to do bris milah. So even then, everything that Avraham Avinu was doing was this whole step against the norms of that time. So anyway, what's going on? So we start off the Pasha, and I'll share, I don't know, there's a lot to say in the Pasha, so I'm not sure if I should share the screen yet or not, but let me share the screen and let's just go, we'll kind of go fast because there's so much to cover. So we start off, and this is the Pasha. Susan always likes me to say, what's the name of the Pasha? So the name of this Pasha is Lech Lecha. And this is the whole story when Avram is approached by Hashem and told, invited, commanded to Lech Lecha, go to yourself. Go to yourself, and the whole existential meaning of not just go to the land that I will show you, but go to your essential self in fulfilling the commands of God. Avraham sort of discovers himself, finds himself, he has to go to himself. Go to the land that I'll show you, leave your birthplace. Now, all of this is along the lines of what I'm saying in terms of philosophically. Leave your birthplace. That's with all the mores of what is going on in Nimrod territory, Nimrod land. From your father's house, well, we know his father was an idol worshiper and even manufactured idols. From your birthplace, from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And the famous thing is that Avram really doesn't know where it is. He has to just go on this journey of faith. And it turns out that this is an incredible beginning for any spiritual journey, that if we're thinking of ourselves right now in the day and age that we are right now, and I keep on saying we in transformative times, we in messianic times, it's in my newsletter. We know what the past looked like. We know that there's craziness now, and we know that a lot of things that are going on right now are a disruption of what was, but we do not know what is coming, right? Do we know what's coming? We don't. Yeah. So what's the biggest impediment to spiritual well-being when you don't know what's coming? What's the biggest impediment, the biggest obstruction to a spiritual health when you don't know what's coming?
Fear.
fear.
That's what I was going to say too.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown, tremendous, right? Fear of the unknown. So what's the antidote of fear?
Courage.
Faith.
Faith,
Yeah,
faith,
faith.
or trust. Also trust.
Right. So you get courage. You're all right. You get courage if you can connect to trust and faith, because otherwise you could be in perpetual state of anxiety. So when Abraham is told to go to some place he has no idea, he doesn't even know, is this a spiritual place? Is this a physical place? Like, what is it? He's putting himself in Hashem's hands. And really, that's a big key for us, that we don't know where this journey of the whole world going a little nuts is going, but we have to have trust and faith that Hashem is leading us. And the more we trust in Hashem and the less we have anxiety and fear, the better we're going to be able to ride that. I don't know if it's a rubber dinghy on a water rafting image, or it's a little wagon, or those little cars on a roller coaster metaphor, but whichever way, you're going to need faith and trust. So I'll make you into a great nation, I'll bless you, and whoever blesses you, I'll bless, and whoever curses you, I'll curse. And he leaves and he goes with his brother, with his wife and his brother's son, and they go and they come into Canaan. And what happens over there? Hashem gives him a promise, and he says, I'm going to give you this land. And he appears to him, and on the plains of Moreh, and the Canaanites were there, and he pitches his tent and he builds an altar, and then it's so beautiful. He comes into this land. Hashem, he goes on this journey. It's not really a vision quest, but it's really like being led into the complete unknown, and it's one of his 10 tests. It's like the complete unknown. I think that's a line from a Bob Dylan song, Into the Complete Unknown. Anyway, he gets there and there's a famine in the land. So he trusted Hashem. Hashem brings him, comes into Canaan, and there's a famine. So he did one test. He followed Hashem, totally followed him, didn't know where he's going. Next test, he comes into the land, and he comes into the land, and Hashem says, you're going to have to go into Egypt, because the land I brought you to it's not quite
Not ready.
there right now. So a little detour. And so Avram goes into Egypt because there was a famine. And now there's this whole story of everything that happens, ma'asim avot simanim labanim. The actions of the forefathers are a sign for the up and coming generations. Ma'aseh avot simanim labanim. So Avram goes into Egypt, and things happen in Egypt, and everything that's happening in Egypt with Avram and Sarah become like, if we think about the spiritual structures that I was talking about, that Avram builds in his being, that becomes almost like, I keep thinking of the word template, a template for our beings later on. We build on the template that Avraham kind of creates in himself. Then his experiences also become part of that template. And one of the things that happens is Avram goes down into Egypt, and he didn't really know he was going down. He goes into Egypt and he comes out of Egypt. And he actually comes out of Egypt quite wealthy. And this serves as like, almost like when I was in university, I learned a method of study skills where you create cognitive hooks, and then you hang things on those cognitive hooks. So Abraham goes into Egypt, and he has a positive experience, really, even though his wife is exposed to danger, but he ends up coming out of it wealthy and doing well. That becomes like a hook in time, like, I don't know, an experiential hook that the whole Jewish people hang on those hooks later on. Is that clear? Is that a good way of explaining it?
Yeah, I think so.
Sort of. So he comes into Egypt, and there's this whole strange story that he realizes, I didn't realize it before, my wife is really beautiful. I think maybe she might be captured, and they might want her as a consort, or someone for Pharaoh, and a whole story that he says, don't tell everyone you my wife, tell them you my sister, otherwise they're going to murder me. And they take Sarah into Pharaoh's court, but Sarah has connections. Sarah is incredibly well connected, and she communicates with angels, and she asks an angel to take care of Pharaoh and make sure that he doesn't abuse her, touch her, harm her. And in fact, Pharaoh realizes this is an extraordinary person. He realizes that he shouldn't have taken her. And really, he sends Sarah and Abraham when they leave Egypt. Abraham has flocks and cattle and donkey and men servants and maid servants and she donkeys and camels and all these things. There's this whole story of, Avram, why didn't you tell me Sarah was your wife and whatever. This going out of Egypt, leaving Egypt with all the wealth that Avram leaves Egypt with, is really the underpinning of the whole point of galus and exile. And I've told it to you so many times, so I'm going to ask you to tell it back to me. Why is this story so? When it came to pass, when Avram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman, they praised her, and then Avram gets flocks and cattle and donkeys. And then because Sarah has this connection with angels and everything, Hashem gives Pharaoh a plague because of Sarah. And he says to Avram, why didn't you tell me she's your wife? And I wouldn't have taken her. And then they escort him and his wife. And when he and his wife leave Egypt, he was heavy with cattle, silver, and with gold. Now, I'm telling you that this is the basis of all exiles, this line. And Avram was heavy with cattle, with silver, and with gold. Someone explain to me, why do we need to have exile? And what does it mean if this is the prototype and this is the template? And the whole point of the whole reason why there was a famine in Canaan and he had to go down to Egypt, and he had to go down so that his wife would be taken into Pharaoh's court so that she should be able to leave and that he would be bestowed with all these gifts. Teach me back what I've said many times before. I am waiting.
I hope the gold and the silver and it's actually like the idols, and it's not the reality. Like, it's nice, but it's a temptation, and that's what people, and especially when we get into goals, that's what they're driven to. They're driven to, the goal. They think that's the ultimate in it's the redemption, and this is it. I got wealth. I'm there. And when in an actuality, it's not. I mean, it's nice, but it's not the real, obviously the real substance of what we're doing. Okay. And coming up to that.
Okay, so Sandra is saying that the idea of the wealth is kind of like a distraction. The idea of the wealth is a distraction, and that's one perspective, that we go into galus, but then all that glitters is not gold, and our role is to not get lost in that glitter. Okay, another explanation or another response? Thank you, Sandra. I value your contribution. Another response? I'll give you a clue. I'll say the word nitsitsut.
It's what?
Nitsitsut. Does anyone know what that word means? Nitsitsut? I know, I'm sure some people know what that word is. Nitsitsut. Holy sparks. Does that ring a bell? Holy sparks?
Yes. We have to find them. I mean, or they're all over the place.
Okay, so tell me more about finding the holy sparks.
So I think no matter where we go, we're there to produce to try to find the sparks to rise up the rest of the people, like we're the light of the nation, but I'm not saying it right, what I want to say.
Well, you've got all the pieces. You've got all of the pieces. Anyone want to help her?
Please.
Okay, so Sandra, just say it again. When we go someplace, there's sparks all over the place. And our job is to try to do what with the sparks?
Try to bring them up.
Try and bring them up. So imagine that they like fairy dust, little gold nuggets, and they got sprinkled in all places. And our job is to try to actually, the Arizal talks about releasing them. They might be buried in different aspects of reality. And it's our job to find them and kind of elevate them or release.
How about being them, like lamplighters?
Tell me more.
So, you could know that energetically there are sparks places, and you could sense it very often, Quorum and Holy Land and things. It could be a place that maybe something happened once and left sparks, but we're told to be a light. I showed my students today the video of the song Be a Light, I think it's called, by is it Yitzhak Horowitz, the man who has ALS?
Oh,
He wrote this song.
Yes.
Yeah. So my students, did they love this video? Everyone should look it up. And it's about, being a light. So light and sparks have some kind of connection, and we're supposed to be a light, and we should attract, we should make sparks, and we should attract people with the sparks through Torah.
Yes. Okay. Very nice. So,
it's nice, but is it true?
yes. Everything that you're saying is exactly true. So, let's take it a little further. I was just thinking how I want to do it. If I want to show you this inside, or I want to talk about it and speak about it. So I'm going to jump to, so everything that you said is great, and we're going to build on it. All right. So, okay, I'm going to jump. Should we jump in the story? Okay, I won't jump in the story. I'm not going to jump in the story. So just hold on to all of that, okay? No, I'm not going to say hold on. Let's explain it now. So,
is there any meaning in the fact that Avram, you kind of used his wife and her beauty to get all that gold from the king?
yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Like, people can say, what was going on in that story? Like, I don't think Avram used his wife, but he felt that he might literally be killed if he said his husband. And there's a lot that they might have murdered him to get her. And if he said that she's his sister, then they wouldn't feel the need to murder him to there's a lot of ink spilt on, well, how did he know she would be okay? She could have not been okay. And maybe he trusted she had protexia, or maybe he trusted in her spiritual level that she would be able to navigate and encounter Pharaoh. I don't think he did it on purpose. I think he was sent to Egypt by God, and he was literally thinking that if they take her, they could murder him. And so this was a way that he wouldn't be murdered, but I don't think he consciously wanted her taken. But this idea of sparks, let me talk about it a little bit, and then we're going to see it a little bit later in the Parsha. It's not just the idea of sparks, but it is the idea of exile as well as the idea of sparks. Every single exile is connected to this idea of sparks and wealth. And the whole reason why Abraham goes down and why later we are in Egypt for that whole period of time. So it says when the world was created, a huge amount of sparks, and Karina's heard me say this a few times, huge amount of sparks fell in Mitzrayim. For whatever reason, there was, and we know that in the ancient cultures, Egypt was a center of spiritual power. Not like now. Now, nothing much is said about Egypt at all. But at that time, in biblical time, it was huge concentration of energy. There was magic, there was a cult, there was all kinds of things. And in all of those things, there's aspects of truth and aspects in the Egyptian culture, aspects of tumah, aspects of idol worship, aspects of a lot of negativity. So let's imagine that we have a big explosion and we had gold, right? We had gold, real gold, and it was heated up, it was heated up, it was heated up, and then it overheated, and then it went boom, and it burst. And from that bursting, a bunch of those golden nuggets, golden sparks got dropped in Egypt. Now, let's say that gold is really truth and meaning and value and important ways of serving God. But they get splashed all around the world and they drop into Egypt. And in Egypt, they get sunken into lots of bad things, lots of very incorrect, misused things. But in the middle of that misused chunk of clay and sod and plastic and whatever, not plastic, they didn't have plastic, but I don't know, like schmutz, right? There's inside the core of it is something very good. So the Jews spend time engaging with the physicality of Egypt, engaging with the culture, engaging with the personas, engaging with the reality there. And in their engaging, they, in a way, extracting and liberating these sparks from where they trapped in shtus and in schmutz and in sheker. Right? You're understanding all my language? Schmutz, yuckiness, sheker, falsehood, klippa, like spiritually impure things. But they're having access to all these things. And when they leave, the gold and the silver and all of that stuff, it's not just the gold and silver, it's a lot of the spiritual stuff that had to be extricated from the Egyptian reality. And then they go off into their future, and the gold and the silver and all of that physically becomes the vessels for building the Mishkan, because they built with gold and silver and everything. And spiritually, the stuff that was used in Egypt for idol worship and for magic and dark magic and occult and all that stuff gets reconfigured in ways of serving God. So that's the idea of releasing sparks. Yes?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Avraham must have, as you're saying, it was a precursor, because from what Hannah said on Monday, that he was very wealthy, came with a lot of wealth, and also spiritually, he was so much more wealthy spiritually. And I think he was able to get his message even more because of the spark of the wealth that he
Yes. So imagine it's ridiculous example, but it's coming to me. The Dalai Lama, Lahavdil, right? He's living in Tibet. He's in his protected place that he was in Tibet. He's not exposed to anything. And then because his country is invaded by China, whoever invaded Tibet, he has to go off into America, and he goes and maybe he gets an education, and maybe he goes and he's exposed to all this kind of thing that he can then bring it back to his people and try and help them navigate and manage in the world, right? That's sort of what came to me. I hope that's
Is that true?
Yes,
Mama,
it
not
is
educated
true.
in America?
It is true, huh?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Tibet was invaded. I don't know if it was Tibet was invaded and he had to escape.
Right, he went to
And
India.
he went to the west, I think. He went to the west, or maybe he went to India, but then
Yeah, but he also went to the United States and went to college.
I don't know if he went to college, but he mixed with a lot of people and he got a lot of ideas and he got a lot of more broad,
Bali Chubas,
exposure, and collected his, because he was in exile from his country, he's spreading his teachings and, as you say, collecting lahavdil balei tshuvas because he's away and out. So that's what the Jewish people do.
But he's told Jews who were wanting to join whatever, his religion or whatever movement, he's actually told them to, after I don't know if they spoke or whatever, he's told people to go back to their religion. 100% he thinks that, he is not, he likes the Jewish religion. He has and he's told Jews, go back to your religion.
Right.
He doesn't.
Right. Okay. So I want to jump. So there's other things that happen. Abraham basically fights the war. There's a big war. There's 4 kings and 5 kings. Basically what happens after the story with Egypt is that he separates from Lot, and Lot goes one way, he goes another way, and he goes off, and then he hears that there's a big war. There's 4 kings and 5 kings, and Abraham gets involved in the war because he hears that one of the sides have kidnapped his nephew Lot, and he goes into the war and he fights, and he kills actually a lot of people, and he's able to save Lot, and he rescues Lot, and then he's a little worried that he killed people, and Hashem made a lot of miracles for him, that he was successful in the war, and he's even worried that maybe he's going to be punished for what he did, and then Hashem reassures him that he won't be punished for what he did, and actually he's going to be he doesn't have to worry about it. And at the end of the war, one of the kings said, I'll give you a lot of reward for what you did. And he says, I don't want to take anything from you, not even a thread or a shoe strap. I don't want to take anything of you. And then we're going to come into all of this. And then here we are in the story. And after all these things, Hashem comes to Avram in a vision saying, don't be afraid. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great, because Avram thought maybe I don't have, Hashem had promised him that he's going to have Eretz Israel. Hashem had promised him that he's going to turn him into a big nation. And he's thinking, maybe I blew it now. I'm supposed to be Abraham the kind, chesed, maybe I blew it. And Hashem says, don't worry. And then Avram says, what are you telling me that I'm going to have so much reward? I don't even have children. You're going to give me a reward, and who's going to be the beneficiary of this reward? Who's going to inherit from me? My helper Eliezer of Damascus, is he the one who's going to inherit after me? I don't have any children. And then Hashem says, don't worry, not Eliezer, but you yourself, you're going to have a child. And then there's this beautiful thing, which I'm not going to focus on, but it is very beautiful, that he says, go outside and look at the stars and count them, and you'll have as many stars as you see in the sky. That's how many descendants you're going to have. And it's a beautiful teaching that according to astrology, he had to take him above the stars, because according to astrology and his mazalot, he wasn't meant to have children, but Hashem takes him out of the system of mazalot. He says, if you connect to me, you can, I will give you an extra letter in your name, and you'll connect to me, and then you're going to transcend your mazel. your muzzles suggest that you don't have any children, you're not going to have any children, you're not destined for children, but because you're a Jew, because you're attached to me, you're outside of that system of muzzle, and you're going to have children. And that's a beautiful teaching, but we're not going to look at that today, more than that. And then this is, the part that I wanted to do now. And this is a part that I've always found very mysterious and very, I've never really studied it before. And then he says, Hashem says, I am the God who brought you from the land, the Ur of the Chaldees, and I'm going to give you Israel. I'm going to give you this land to inherit. And Avram says, how am I going to know that I'm going to inherit the land? Like, I want some reassurance. And then here's a very mysterious thing that happens. So Hashem says, I want you to take me 3 heifers, 3 goats, 3 rams, and a turtle dove, and a young bird. And I want you to divide all of them up down the middle and put one on one side and one on the other side. And to do that, and I wonder if I should show the Rashi here. Yeah, so I want you to do that. And then what happened? He divided all of them down the middle. And after he divided them, some birds of prey came and he shooed them away. And actually the Rashis are very interesting. Now the sun was ready to set and a deep sleep fell on Avram, and he had a big frightening darkness came on him. And what happened? And then he has like a vision of all the exiles that are going to happen to the Jewish people. It's very interesting. He says, you are going to be strangers in a land, your children are going to be strangers in a land, and they're going to be oppressed for 400 years. And so he's being told by Hashem, there's so many things to say here. He's been told by Hashem he's going to get this incredible reward. He's been told by Hashem he's going to get Eretz Israel. He's been told by Hashem that he's going to have children as numerous as the stars in the sky. He's having a very spiritual experience. He took all of these animals and he cut them in half, but the birds, there was 2 birds that he didn't cut in half. What were the birds? A turtle dove and another young bird, a pigeon, a turtle dove and a pigeon. They represent, and all these other animals represent the other nations of the world, and they get cut, and the turtle dove and the bird doesn't get cut, which is symbolic of Israel. And then he has this like almost like a dark dream, a vision of darkness about the exiles that are going to face the Jewish people. And you should look at these Rashis. A deep sleep fell on him, and a great darkness, a frightening darkness falls, and basically a foretelling of exile. And then again, this echoing, and then the nation that they will serve, I will judge, and afterwards you'll leave Egypt with great wealth. Again, and you'll come to your forefathers in peace, and you'll be buried in a good old age. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? This is his reward, that he's seeing that there's going to be all of this exile. So I wanted to talk about it. I know it's getting a little bit late, but I just want to talk about these exiles and talk about why, in fact, the exiles, they seem to be a big punishment, but actually for some very interesting reason, they're not punishments. They're actually aspects of Hashem's kindness, which seems counterintuitive. So I'm just looking for the place where I wrote down all my notes. Okay, so when we said here, now the sun was ready to set, and a deep sleep fell upon Avram, and behold, a fright, a great darkness was falling upon him. It says the Midrash comments that these four expressions of darkness, fright, deep sleep, each word is a different exile of the Jewish people. The dread is the Babylonian exile. The dark is the Media, that's Persia exile. The ominous is the Greek exile, and the overwhelmed. Oh, this is a different translation. In the translation I have, it says he was overwhelmed by a dark and ominous dread. Deep sleep, overwhelmed, dark and ominous dread. And those are Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman exile. And so at this moment when Hashem is telling him about all the great things that are going to happen in his future, he's getting all of this exile. And that would seem very counterintuitive. So I'm going to read it right from the text, and then with this we'll kind of wrap up, but it's a very deep idea. And it's, before I read it, I want you to think of it in terms of everything that happens to you in your personal life as well. That sometimes you're going on a you get led off the beaten track, and you think you're going into a place of great darkness or punishment, God forbid, but actually you're only being led off your track. You think it's for the sake of maybe punishing you, or you're getting lost, but really you're taking a detour for the sake of finding a great treasure in order to bring back your great treasure. And it's actually God's love leading you off your track, and not his gevura, not his desire to hurt you in any way, but really his desire to show how much he loves you. So let me just read this out aloud. So the answer lies in the fact that in the inner meaning, exile does not express God's estrangement from the Jewish people, but rather his love for them. By the way of a metaphor, in the midst of teaching, a teacher may think of an idea, and then he might kind of interrupt his flow, and he gets distracted and he's looking for an example, and the student might think he's lost track with his lesson, but in fact he's going on a detour for the sake of making the lesson even stronger. And it's saying, in a similar way, exile could seem like a terrible reality. And this is why I was asking you from Avraham's initial experience. Exile's true purpose is to serve as a preparation for greater revelation that will take place, a revelation that will shed light on the inner meaning of all the sufferings of exile. Because exile in its essence is also an expression of God's love. And because each exile is actually an opportunity for more sparks, for more converts, for more riches for the Jewish people to encounter other nations, for other nations to encounter them, for the nations to encounter, for the Jewish people to encounter other teachings, to broaden, to actually get those nitzitzim to actually to contribute to the perfection of the world. They're not distractions, they're part of the very reason for it's an expression of God's infinite love. Furthermore, this also explains why during the destruction of the temple, even the keruvim on the ark cover were embracing each other. They weren't, we have this teaching that the two angels, the keruvim, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim used to face each other, or turn away from each other when Hashem was angry with the Jewish people. But when the temple was destroyed, they were actually facing each other, an indication of God's love for the Jewish people, since ultimately the destruction and subsequent exile were an expression of God's love. Now that seems counterintuitive.
Yep.
But here, it's basically here that regarding all exiles and regarding our current and final exile, the primary objective is not to atone for sin, but rather to enable us to redeem the holy sparks that were scattered around the world and which become embedded in physical reality. The reality of all these places, the blood and the sweat and the tears, the earth, the dough, the olive trees, the soil, the actual reality of all these places where Jews have gone. Sometimes it suffices even for a single individual to be exiled to a given country. Hashem is granting that solitary individual the capacity to elevate all the sparks in that place, helping it to become prepared for the Messianic age. And so Avram is foreseeing the other positive byproducts of exile. For example, when godliness is concealed from us, we value it and yearn for it more intensely. Avram therefore chose to overlook the pain and suffering exile would entail in favor of its advantageous benefits. So it's a deep idea, and it's hard to, do it justice. But the idea that this experience when Avram is getting told by Hashem that he's being rewarded, and then he has this deep sleep and he's seeing this kind of exile, but then seeing through the exile that actually it's for the revelation of a greater light. Now, it's not to say that the Jewish people haven't suffered terribly in all those exiles. It's not to say that any of them have been easy. It's not to say that the Jewish people paid a big price every time, but it is to say somehow that there's a purpose to it, and that purpose is connected to this great wealth that keeps on coming after. When Avram was with Sarah, the great wealth. When we as Jews were in Egypt, the great wealth. And then now we're in an exile as well, the exile of Rome, of Edom, and that hopefully we are able to engage with the reality of our exile. It's on us to somehow transform it or extract those nitzitsut, those sparks, to take out of, like, for example, Zoom, right? Zoom's a great thing. It's allowing us to learn Torah on the computer. The technology of today, there's some people who say the whole thing is terrible, but if we can learn Torah using technology, we taking something of Western culture and elevating it, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's Zoom, whether it's in the Rebbe's time, television. They used television and radio to broadcast the Rebbe's teachings all across the world. A car, a mobile, they made mitzvah tanks from cars, to take everything in the physical world and use it for good. So now we're in the land of America and the Western reality of financial prosperity and terrible preoccupation with physicality and materiality, but to take that and turn it for good, use it for good. That's why we're in this exile, so that we can release the sparks, take materialism. Don't say, I don't get involved with that. I don't do that. It's to say, I do that, but only for good. I have a beautiful Shabbos table for mitzvahs, for having guests. I have furniture so that I can do hachnasas orchim. I have clothes so that I can, walk around like that. When the queen passed away, they said she was such an example of dignity and royalty and everything in the physical world. We in this physical reality because we have to learn how to turn it and use it for good. And that's what the exiles were, and that's what the great wealth is from the exiles. And so Avram had his mini experience of it, and then the Jewish people have a maxi experience of it, not just in Egypt, but then Persia, Greece, now we have Rome. And when we can learn how to penetrate the darkness of exile by elevating all the buried lights in it, then that exile transforms into a geula. The gola, the galus, transforms into geula, the redemption. And that's what some of this is all about.
Wow. So
Wow.
basically, he sent us
Wow.
all into the diaspora to spread the Jewish fairy dust.
Yes, that is exactly.
That's great.
and
That's a good way to put it.
it's that's exactly right. And it's also, that's why we created in the first place, is to spread the Jewish fairy dust. That is the whole point of creation, is that God had all the fairy dust in his realm. And he's like, I don't want to live with this fairy dust up in heaven. I want it to be in the world. And the Jewish people are supposedly, according to everything we've learned, his agents of spreading the fairy dust. And that's our purpose in the world, is to spread the fairy dust and find it when it's hidden, and hidden all around the world. So spread it and find it and reveal it where it's hidden around the world. And that's really why we created. That's why we have a Torah. That's why we have mitzvot. And that's what our whole life is supposed to be about, is being fairy dust workers. And as Susan said, lamplighters.
Lamplighters.
Translators, I like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Baruch, I'm laughing because before my kids leave for school in the morning, they're like, Mom, can you bless me? I have a test today. So I have this thing where I say, fairy dust,
That is
fairy
so
dust,
cute.
fairy dust, 100 for you. And then to the other one, fairy
Aw.
dust, 100 for you.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
love
sitting here and I'm loving the fairy dust examples.
That's
That's
so
just
cute.
beautiful.
That's sweet.
fairy dust and
Aw.
sparks, right?
Yes,
Fairy dust and
Fairy
sparks.
dust and sparks. And I
Right.
hope I'm pronouncing it right. The nitzutsim. Nitzutz is a spark. So these holy sparks, the Arizal has a philosophy that the whole point of creation is this discovering these holy sparks and revealing them. That is our purpose of our life. So if you land up, you took a wrong turn and you land up in the middle of nowhere and you're in some bar somewhere, because that's the place you can get any, Coca-Cola or whatever. What am I doing here? Well, there must be a spark here that I need to release.
I bet Kavorim have those holy spark.
And
Kavorim.
I say a blessing on my Coca-Cola in this place, because I needed to be saying a blessing. Or there's a person here I'm supposed to talk to. Maybe I'm supposed to, there's someone sitting here who needs my help.
Connection to
Or,
make.
that's the consciousness of everywhere we go, wherever we land up, we kind of spark redeemers, spark redeemers.
There's a Hayom Yom about this matter. I don't remember the date though at all, but it says something to the effect of that tzaddikim know where they're supposed to be. So that's where they are, or where they go, I guess. And the rest of us, wherever we are, that's where the sparks are that we're supposed to elevate.
Oh, I love that.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
And
Love that.
right. And sometimes at tzaddik, in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, or even in the times of the Rebbe, the tzaddik would send you somewhere because he knew that there was a spark you needed to elevate somewhere. And so the Baal Shem Tov would tell someone to go somewhere, or he knew, like Yaakov said, he knew where he had to go. But we have to trust Hashgacha Pratis, where we land up. That's where we need to be. And it's not that we don't make decisions. I think I want to go there. I think I want to go there. But you can look at the reality of your life, and where you are, that's where you have sparks to redeem.
Absolutely.
Bracha.
Yes.
It's all very deep and beautiful, and I loved all these things. I'm just thinking back to Hashem's promise
To
that
Hashem.
he says, I'm to a land that I'm going to show you. He never showed him.
Well, he brought him to Canaan.
That's considered the answer to where he,
I think
then
so.
he had to,
And then he does show, he said, I'm going to give you this land. I think that he does show.
does
what
he? Oh, okay.
does. I think he does. I think he brings him to the land and says that, I think he does. Let's just look.
Yeah, I guess, you know what?
Descendants, I've given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the Kenite, and then he tells, he says, then he says all the nations of all that are occupying all the parts. He says all their land and their land and their land, all of theirs is going to be yours.
Is that where we sort of get the proof that that land is ours? I'm not getting political or anything. I'm just saying, I know that no, I am totally not. I just know the Arabs say this, but this is really where, this is the place where we're getting it.
There's 10 nations that we defeated 7 of them and we took their land, and the last 3 are we going to get when Mashiach comes, and then there's a whole essay, how come we got 7 and not 3? So the 7 connect to emotional qualities that we rectified at that time, but the 3 that we didn't get yet connect to the intellectual aspects that have yet to be fixed, which will come when we view life with the correct philosophical constructs, which is that God is really in charge and we really nothing but
no
God.
control.
And it says, to your descendants have I given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river,
Thank you.
the Euphrates River. And then it has
Thank you.
the list of all these nations, and he's showing him, this is the land that I'm giving to you and your descendants.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies, have a beautiful show. Next Shabbos is Shabbat. So let people know if you feel like anyone might benefit from it, especially people who haven't really had so much experience with Shabbos. It's a nice way for people to come in and experience Shabbos. And
Oh,
I have a friend you're gonna love who wants to come. I'm so excited.
so let me know, because it's a week away. She has
Yeah,
to.
I told her she's gonna sign up.
Okay, good.
yeah, I'm working on somebody also that I want. to
I only
try
have
to-
about 8 spots left, so
Oh,
let
okay.
contact me sooner than later.
Can I ask you, Friday night, do you dress up? Do we dress up for dinner Friday night?